You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, it's so proper. We are welcoming you to The Bible Guys. I'm Chris, this is Jeff, and we are glad to be here.
I wish we had like a tea set here and we were
drinking
tea and eating scones.
Yeah, little scones. Hello.
I ordered, there's one of the oldest and most prestigious tea companies in London is Fortnum and Mason.
Okay.
And they have this incredible store near Piccadilly Square. And so when I was there, I had a friend with me. He goes, dude, you got to have some of these cookies. And they have these cookies. The inside is like scones, but they completely cover them in thick chocolate, which, I love chocolate so much.
Right.
They were so incredible. And I bought 2 different kinds. They were so incredible. And this store is huge. It's like 5 stories. Wow. It's all snacks and tea. It's incredible, right? and very expensive. I loved them so much. I called my wife. I was going to try to bring them home, and I couldn't help myself. I ate them all, right? So on this trip I was on, so I told my wife, I was like, oh, Bonnie, these are incredible. They're amazing. I've never had a cookie better than this cookie. And, the tea was good, everything else. And so I got home, and I ordered 2 boxes of cookies. They have 10 cookies in each one. And I didn't even look at the price. And then my wife was like, hey, how come we had a $56 order from a tea company in London on the thing? Yeah. So I paid $56 for 10 20 cookies.
For 20 cookies? That's great. Those are pretty expensive.
They were so good, though. Yeah, so good. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie, they're gone.
Yeah, so, of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what you do with cookies.
So your little royal introduction there.
Yeah, it was all
I was just thinking if we had a teacup and our little pinkies were up and we were eating our little chocolate cookies.
You immediately started tasting cookies.
Absolutely. That's right.
just from my greeting. Well, hey, we're going to do a segment that Desiree has put together. This is something I've never seen before, and I got to be honest. I just glanced ahead a few seconds ago at these questions. And I'm not certain we're gonna repeat this segment.
I tried not to think too hard about this one. So
okay, ready?
Yes.
I'll let you go first.
Okay.
Take turns sharing what you would do in these scenarios. Okay. I'll read the first one. You ready?
Okay.
What would you do? This is what the segment is called. What would you do? What would you do if you found out that you'd been living in a reality TV show for years and were only now told?
What? What would I do?
Yeah. What would you do?
Hire a lawyer and get royalties.
Right.
If I was the star of a TV show, I just found out about it because I haven't been getting paid. Don't you want to get paid?
That's actually a decent answer.
Okay.
That's interesting enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I would do.
All right.
What would you do?
Well, my first instinct was to say, because the Truman Show, this is the plot of the Truman Show.
Oh, that's right. Who was it? Jim Carrey. Yeah. He found out he was living in a
reality show, and he did his best to get out of that reality show, to live his life in freedom.
Look at you, equating everything to a movie.
Well, you went to cookies.
Yeah, that's true. Well, just priorities. Yeah. You think about movies all the time. I think about chocolate cookies all the time. That makes sense.
Yeah. So
super sophisticated people here on this show. That's only the most sophisticated.
I mean, I don't have a great answer for that other than to get out of the situation.
All right. Well, then let me try number 2. Number 2 says, what would you do if you were suddenly followed everywhere by a troupe of professional mimes who copied your every move? Professional mimes who copied your every move.
See, this is why I can't figure out this segment. Okay, ready? Here's what I would do. I would do my best to get away from such said mimes.
Yeah, I would have sworn you were going to say you'd jump off a bridge.
Yeah, no.
So everything, if you don't know Chris well, Chris lives his life in hyperbole. Everything is the best, the biggest, the most amazing, or it's the single worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And it makes me want to jump off a bridge. I've heard that phrase 10 times.
Oh, way more than 10 times. I was going to say, I've used that phrase 100 times.
I'm telling you, it's the single worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It just makes me want to go jump off a bridge. So I would think then having a bunch of mimes following you around, that you would just jump off a bridge.
Yeah, but the game is called...
Because that would make them all jump off the bridge.
But the game is called What Would You Do? And I'm a rule follower on games. So I'm literally trying to answer... Because I would not jump off a bridge. Right? I would do my best to figure out why the mimes are there and how can I get
they would
away
have to
from
all
them.
jump off the bridge too.
Oh, look at you.
You see? So if you had a parachute and they didn't.
But then they would all get parachutes.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you could swim and they couldn't.
How would I know that?
I don't know.
They don't
but
talk.
you might get rid of some of them.
I can't ask them.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd be like, signing for them. It would be like, hey, can you swim? No. Okay.
No.
I don't know.
All right. I'll read
that's
the
a crazy
third
one.
I'll read the third
Okay,
one.
try it.
And the last one, thank goodness. What would you do if every time you entered a room, you had to perform a 30-second dance routine before you can start your day?
Well, I think probably what I would do is...
Perform the 30-second dance routine because it says you had to?
You have to, yeah. But, I mean, you want to be creative and super impressive. And so I'd probably go back and review the footage from the breakdancing lady from Australia.
Oh, wow.
From the Olympics.
Wow.
And maybe work on some cool moves.
Now that the Olympics are done, I got to tell you this. The only two people I'm going to remember is, number one, that lady, and then the second best shooter from Turkey. That's it.
The silver medal guy with his hand in his pocket.
Yes. Those are the only two people I'm going to remember.
You know what?
And Simone. That's it.
I think...
3.
I think this is the first time I didn't watch a single event. Not a single event. So I saw my kids were watching a video of that lady dancing. Yeah. And then I saw the picture of the guy that's shooting. I don't know. I just didn't get into it this year. Oh. Yeah, it was weird.
Wow.
I've been really busy though too. So that was part of it is,
yeah.
I'm driving down the road listening to sports radio and they're telling you who won medals. And so at that point I need to go watch the replay of the medals.
Right. We live in a world of highlights.
Yeah.
So you got the highlights already.
So that's pretty much it.
It's like the old Cliff's Notes that we used
what
to
would
buy.
you do? What would you do if you had to do a 30-second dance before you walked into the room every day, before you could start your day?
It says had to. So what would I do? I guess I'd have to do the 30-second dance routine. Mm-hmm. The end.
Are you a good dancer?
This is why I don't like this segment. Like, I don't understand the questions. Yeah. What would I do? I guess I'd do the dance.
Chris isn't feeling very fun today, in case you're wondering. So.
No, I'm just trying to figure out how to make this game work. Okay. This segment.
Well, we took 7 minutes to get to that point, so we should probably move on.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Well, that is our time for games. We need to move on.
Okay.
How about a little Bible?
There you go. So we are in 1 Samuel.
Yes.
So this is the second day of 1 Samuel. We're going to jump to chapter 3.
Did you say the second day?
Second day in 1 Samuel.
Oh, the second podcast day.
Yes.
I was like, there's been more than 2 days. Samuel was born already. Yeah. He's a young lad. Yeah.
So he is born. His mom takes him to the tabernacle when he's 5 years old.
Yeah, and then...
and he begins to work for Eli, the high priest.
Yes.
And so in chapter 3, it says, Meanwhile, the boy Samuel served the Lord by assisting Eli. Now in those days, messages from the Lord were very rare, and visions were quite uncommon. One night, Eli, who was almost blind by now, had gone to bed. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle near the ark of God. Suddenly, the Lord called out, Samuel. Yes, Samuel replied. What is it? He got up and ran to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, Eli replied. Go back to bed. So he did. Then the Lord called out again, Samuel. Then Samuel got up again and went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, my son, Eli said. Go back to bed. Samuel did not yet know the Lord because he had never had a message from the Lord before. So the Lord called a third time, and once more Samuel got up and went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? Then Eli realized it was the Lord who was calling the boy. So he said to Samuel, Go and lie down again, and if someone calls again, say, Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. So Samuel went back to bed. And the Lord came and called as before, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel replied, Speak, your servant is listening. Then the Lord said to Samuel, I am about to do a shocking thing in Israel. I'm going to carry out all my threats against Eli and his family from beginning to end, and I have warned him that judgment is coming upon his family forever because his sons are blaspheming God, and he hasn't disciplined them. So I vowed that the sins of Eli and his sons will never be forgiven by sacrifices or offerings. So Samuel stayed in bed until morning, then got up and opened the doors of the tabernacle as usual. He was afraid to tell Eli what the Lord had said to him, but Eli called out to him, Samuel, my son. Here I am. Samuel replied, What did the Lord say to you? Tell me everything, and may God strike you and even kill you if you hide anything from me. So Samuel told Eli everything. He didn't hold back anything. "It is the Lord's will," Eli replied. "Let him do what he thinks best."
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Eli knows.
Eli
it's
had
coming.
Samuel had a rough go there.
Yeah, he did. A young man who's put in a really precarious situation here.
Yes.
Right. So he's
Right from the get-go.
We're talking about the high priest here. We're talking about the sole authority in the temple, and Samuel's like what, like an intern, right? And,
yeah, well, probably more like a butler, right?
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show you that God's favor doesn't go by title or authority. It goes by your faith and your heart, doesn't it?
Right.
It goes by, Samuel loved the Lord. He had a pure heart. Eli had been warned by God. And by the way, those are the chapters that we skipped over. Chapter number 2, if you go back there and you go back and read all of chapter 2, you'll find out that his sons, how do you say it? I say Hophni and Phinehas. Is it Hophni or Hophni?
Yeah, either way.
Either way. So I always say Hophni and Phinehas. But it actually listed and told us what they were doing. They were blaspheming God. They were eating the meat that was being sacrificed at the temple. So people would come, just so you'll know, and they bring their sacrifices to God to be, given to God as a sacrifice. And these would be animals. And instead of, preparing the bull or the sacrifice and burning it and giving it to God, they would eat it. Can you imagine? That's like stealing out of the offering.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's like we don't have anything equivalent today to compare it to as pastors, but that's really what they're doing. And
this was something given to God.
Right. And they're eating it. And then it says that they were having sex with women at the temple gates. Yeah. So they were using their influence or their position and using it for that reason. And so God warned Eli. He warned Eli, hey, take care of your family. Eli didn't do it. So we get a sense, don't we, that Eli looks over at Samuel and says, don't hold anything back. May God kill you if you hold anything back from me. Because Eli knows what's coming. He knows that Samuel is going to be afraid to tell him what the deal is, right? Like he's thinking, I know it's coming. Don't you dare hold anything back from me. Because Eli knows that God warned him already. And so Samuel doesn't hold anything back, and he goes, well, it is what it is. He knows it's coming, and he knows he deserves it. Because he didn't obey anything that God had asked him to do.
Yeah, but poor Samuel, first time he hears from God, he's like, hey, I need to tell you something about your boss.
Right.
That's a rough one. But, God knows what you can handle. Mm-hmm. And God also knows what he's developing and planning for you in the future. And so you have the promise from God to Samuel is that God was going to remove Eli and would make then Samuel be a leader to the kings. There were no kings yet, right? And so God was bringing Samuel into this place where he was going to have to do a lot of hard things. So, God was stretching him. God was challenging him. God was giving him an opportunity to do a really hard thing today because he has a whole series of difficult things he's going to do, standing against other blasphemers, confronting kings, right? Really, really hard things that he winds up doing. And so God's prepping him, even as a young man here. So I would say one big lesson to learn here is don't shy away from hard things. Do hard things. Yeah. I read a book one time when I was...
You did?
I did. One time. I read a book. When I was in college, I had a professor that I really looked up to. And I had gone, in high school, middle school, high school, I read all the time. We didn't have a television. Then I went to college, and I didn't read for pleasure at all. I just worked, right? So I was working a lot of hours. I was tired all the time. I was sleeping about 4.5 or 5 hours a night, max. And so I was tired. And so if I'd open a book, I'd just fall asleep, right? Is what would happen. So other than studying, I wasn't reading. And then I had this professor who talked about the wisest people he knew, some of the most successful people he knew, didn't just read for to pass a test, but would read for personal improvement. And I thought, I haven't read any book for personal improvement in forever, right? Now in reality, I think when you're in college, you are improving. You're trying to. I just didn't equate the two. So I went to him and I asked him this. I said, "Hey, what would you read?" And he gave me this little book. It wasn't very big. It's maybe like 100 pages, and I think it's out of print now. But it said, "Do Hard Things." That was the title. Do Hard Things. And the whole premise was, it was this guy from, he seems to be like a World War II generation guy, and they were just tough.
Sure.
And he might have been older than the World War II generation, but it seemed like it was a book that was written for young men during that time. He's a successful business guy. And the whole thing was, whatever hard thing you haven't done yet, if you're physically capable, go do it. Go do the hard things. Do the hard things. The hard things make you harder. They make you stronger. And it's hard men who sees the world, not soft men, right? And so that was the idea. And there is something to that God made us a part of, even before the curse, God made us to work. Work is not a curse.
Right.
Work was a gift from God. It gives purpose. And so he put them in a garden. It's going to be physical work. It's the sweat of your brow. It's the struggle of work. It's the, I put in all this work and hardly get any harvest from it kind of thing is the curse. But the work itself, God wanted humanity to be strong, to work hard, to produce things. And then we tend to, the more successful we get, the less work we try to do. We try to do softer work, softer and softer and softer. And so, we as a culture, we try to make things easier, and we try not to have to say the hard thing. We try to learn we try not even to learn how to say the hard thing. We try to avoid the hard things. And instead, I think that maybe, in this situation with Samuel says, or God says to Samuel, I'm going to tell you something that's going to be hard. But God trusted him with it. And then all he had to do was be faithful to do that hard thing. Yeah. And then God set him up for an incredibly successful ministry for a very long period of time in his life.
One of the things I love about this story, it's one of my favorites in the Old Testament, actually, because there's a lot of application to this. So you think about Samuel, or think about Eli. Eli is a person who should have known better. Here's Samuel. He's literally just one, I want to say it's really a wall. It's a wall of some kind. It's probably not a brick wall. It's a curtain.
It's a curtain.
But it's a very thick curtain, right?
Yeah.
And but he's one curtain away from the Holy of Holies. So the Ark of the Covenant is right there. Here's Samuel sleeping in a chamber that's just outside of there. And all of a sudden he hears Samuel. And Eli, now it did say that God hadn't spoken in a long time. Visions were rare. But at the same time, Eli is an old man. He's so old that his eyes could barely work. He's almost blind by now. So Eli was old. He was wise. He had all the wisdom and experience that a high priest should have. Eli should have known better. So if somebody calls, the first instinct that Eli should have had is, well, that must be God because it wasn't me, right? But he doesn't. He says, no, we're the only two in here. It wasn't me. You're hearing things. Go lay back down. And then he doesn't even recognize it the second time. You know what that means? To me, it means that Eli is so far removed from the ways and the works of God, he doesn't even recognize God's works anymore, right? We already know he's callous. We already know he's, ignored God's warnings about disciplining his sons. He's allowing his sons to run all over them, to develop a bad reputation, which reflects bad on him. So here's Eli. He's not heard God's call in a very, very long time. And so maybe that's you. Maybe you're listening to the podcast and you're at home and you're like, man, it's been a long time since I've really heard from God. I'm around the things of God. I go to church, but my personal relationship with God is not very strong. I would just say, just be like Hannah, right? Fall to your knees, pray earnestly. And then you have Samuel. Samuel's a guy who's hearing God's call for the very first time, right? He's never heard God's call before. In fact, it even says in verse number 9, Samuel did not yet know the Lord. Right. So he's hearing God's call for the very first time. So I would say, you may be there listening, and that may be you, to hear God's call, for salvation, for a relationship with him. And then you have Hophni and Phinehas in the story, who are turning a deaf ear to God's call. It's the worst place to be. It's the blaspheming. You're so callous. You're so unbelievably hardened in your heart that you turn a deaf ear to God's call. And even if it's painstakingly obvious that God is trying to get your attention, you're in a blaspheming state where you do not care, where you're like, I'll just mock God, make fun of God, blaspheme God, and not think twice about it. And that's the worst place to be. That's the scary place to be. Yeah. Right? All of us should fear being at that place in our lives.
I've had people say, man, if God would just say it to me, if he would just speak to me, right? A while ago, I had an opportunity. I spoke at an event, and a person that I look up to from a distance, we haven't met, but a pretty well-known pastor, communicator, all those things, tuned in and listened to, he heard that I was speaking and tuned in, and then sent me a text.
Wow.
And the text was like, hey, I saw your message today, thought it was really good, and thank you, or whatever. So I texted back, and then we exchanged a couple of texts back and forth, and I'm going to, next time I'm in town, I'll probably connect with him. He didn't call me. I didn't hear his audible voice, but getting that text was like, oh my gosh. One, he knows my name. Right. Two, he reached out to me. How did he find my phone number? That means he chased down the people who put together the event that I spoke at, and he reached out to me that way. But he wanted to assert himself into my life in that moment, because I had no idea he was even watching. How would I have known he was watching? I didn't.
Right.
He wanted to inject himself into my life, and he did it through a text. And so that's exactly what God did for us. Mm-hmm. I've never heard God speak out loud, but I've got 30 some odd thousand verses where he spoke to me.
Right. We have the text, don't we?
Right, we do. We have the text. And so we have to just be honored by the fact that he gave us his word. Mm-hmm. If God is being silent, what Samuel or what Eli did not have was all of this book, right? He probably had the books of Moses.
Right.
And that would have been it, right? And but God gave us this word to speak to us. As a matter of fact, in both Peter and Paul have told us that God gave us these words for our own example. He tells us these stories about, Hophni and Phinehas, about Eli, about Samuel, about Hannah, for our example. Literally, the idea of an example is you're supposed to learn from that example, right? Mm-hmm. Benefit from it. You learn what to do or learn what not to do. And so God did speak to us. He spoke to us by text. And someday we're going to go see him. But between here and there, applying what is said and engaging with what God did say, instead of being frustrated that he didn't say something out loud to you, right? I've never been frustrated that I never heard God's voice out loud.
Right.
I've always been content with the fact that he's been really clear with what, and I'm not totally fulfilling everything I know in this book yet. So I don't need any more words.
Right.
To whom much is given, much is required, Jesus said.
Right.
I don't want more stuff I'm going to be held accountable for until I master this one. So this is a lifetime of work to be able to master. And I don't think you ever will till you get to heaven, but master this book. And so rather than being frustrated that you're not hearing God's words out loud, spend more time in the words God did give you. Spend
That's
time
awesome.
with the text.
Well, that is a great place to end, and a good word. So a great story. And so we'll continue on. Hopefully we'll see you then next time on the Bible Guys.